You think you're stuck because you're not doing enough. So you plan more. You visualize harder. You control every detail. You try to make the perfect move at the perfect time. But here's the truth that nobody wants to admit: you're not stuck because you lack discipline or clarity. You're stuck because you're controlling. And control, no matter how responsible it looks from the outside, is just fear wearing a sophisticated disguise. At the quantum level, control doesn't create movement. It freezes it. Every time you try to collapse reality before it's ready, you don't jump timelines. You repeat them. What if the breakthrough you've been forcing isn't waiting for you to figure it all out? What if it's waiting for you to stop managing every outcome and finally let the field reorganize itself? This isn't about giving up. It's about understanding why control keeps you locked in the same loop.
You're not stuck because you lack discipline. You're not stuck because you don't know what you want. And you're not stuck because the universe is testing your patience. You're stuck because you're controlling. That might be hard to hear, especially if you're someone who's been doing everything right, planning carefully, visualizing outcomes, thinking ahead, trying to stay positive, trying to make the correct move at the correct time. From the outside, it looks like responsibility. From the inside, it feels like effort. But at the quantum level, control is not strength. It's fear wearing a sophisticated disguise. Control is the attempt to collapse reality before it has actually reorganized. And when you do that, you don't move timelines. You repeat them. Most people believe they're stuck because nothing is changing. But what's actually happening is far more precise. The same reality keeps replaying because the observer hasn't changed. The identity trying to make things happen is the same identity that created the current timeline in the first place. And as long as that identity stays in charge, the field has no reason to reorganize. In quantum physics, observation doesn't create reality by force. It collapses probability by coherence. When the observer is rigid, the collapse is rigid. When the observer is fearful, the collapse is narrow. Control narrows probability. It doesn't expand it. Think about what control really is. It's the constant internal monitoring of outcomes. The silent question running underneath your thoughts: is this working? That question alone locks you into the same temporal loop because it positions fulfillment in the future and denies sufficiency in the present. The field hears that clearly. From a neurological perspective, control activates prediction error management. Your brain tries to reduce uncertainty by repeating known patterns. Even if those patterns are uncomfortable, they're familiar. Familiarity feels safer than the unknown. So the system chooses repetition over expansion. Spiritually, this is why so many people feel exhausted without understanding why. They're not tired from action. They're tired from control, from holding reality together with mental effort, from believing that if they let go for even a moment, everything will fall apart. But here's the paradox most people miss. Nothing new can enter a system that's being tightly managed. Control freezes motion. It keeps reality in superposition, constantly observed, never allowed to resolve into a new state. This is why manifestation techniques often backfire. They add more monitoring, more checking, more pressure. Instead of opening the field, they compress it. The more you try to decide how something must happen, the fewer pathways remain available. Timelines don't change when you push harder. They change when the identity that needs to push relaxes its grip. And this is where discomfort begins. Because control isn't just a habit, it's an identity. Letting go doesn't just mean releasing outcomes. It means releasing the version of yourself that believes it must manage reality to survive. That's why people say they want a new life, but resist the internal conditions required for it. A new timeline requires a new observer, and a new observer cannot emerge while the old one is still micromanaging the field. If you feel like you've been doing everything right and still ending up in the same place, this isn't a punishment, it's feedback. The field is showing you that effort without surrender produces repetition. You're not blocked. You're holding the door shut. And until control loosens, reality has no room to collapse into anything new. That's the invisible cage most people never see. And once you recognize it, the next question becomes unavoidable. If control is what keeps you stuck, what actually allows a timeline to change? That's where the real shift begins. Control feels logical because the mind was designed to predict. The brain's primary function is not happiness or expansion, it's survival through anticipation. When you try to control outcomes, you're not being intentional. You're attempting to reduce uncertainty. And uncertainty is exactly where quantum change lives. From a quantum physics perspective, reality exists as probability until observation collapses it. But collapse does not occur through force, it occurs through coherence. When the observer is tense, vigilant, and hyper-focused on specific outcomes, the observation itself becomes noisy. Instead of allowing the field to resolve into a new configuration, you lock it into familiar patterns. This is why control produces repetition. The same thoughts generate the same emotional responses. The same emotional responses reinforce the same decisions. The same decisions anchor the same timeline. Nothing external needs to block you for this loop to persist. The observer is doing the work of containment internally. Neuroscience explains this clearly. When you attempt to control your life, your brain activates predictive loops based on past data. It doesn't imagine freely. It extrapolates. It says what happened before is the safest reference for what should happen next. Even if the past was limiting, it's known, and known patterns feel safer than unknown potential. This is why people often say they're afraid to let go, even when what they're holding on to isn't working. Control isn't about success, it's about predictability. And predictability keeps you anchored to the same timeline. In the comments, drop one word that represents the old pattern you're ready to release. Maybe it's control, maybe it's fear, maybe it's doubt, maybe it's something uniquely yours. Let this be a small but profound declaration, a signal you send not just in this space, but into the quantum field itself. Spiritually, this is where people misunderstand surrender. They assume surrender means passivity or irresponsibility. But surrender, in quantum terms, is the release of micromanagement. It's allowing the field to organize beyond your current perception. Control insists reality move through narrow channels. Surrender allows it to reorganize through pathways you couldn't have planned. The quantum field is not responsive to force, it's responsive to alignment. Alignment happens when the observer is internally stable but externally open. Control creates internal tension and external rigidity. That combination freezes probability rather than collapsing it into something new. You may notice this in your own life. The more you try to figure everything out, the less movement you experience. Decisions feel heavy. Timing feels off. Opportunities appear but don't connect. That's not bad luck. That's the field responding precisely to a constrained observer. Control also fragments attention. You're constantly checking, adjusting, correcting. That fragmentation weakens signal strength. The field responds to consistency, not constant adjustment. When your internal state keeps shifting between hope and fear, confidence and doubt, the field receives mixed information and reflects uncertainty back to you. This is why people who stop trying often experience sudden breakthroughs, not because effort is wrong, but because effort rooted in control dissolves coherence. When control drops, attention stabilizes. The observer becomes quiet enough for probability to resolve naturally. Nothing new enters a system that's being tightly supervised. Expansion requires space, and space only appears when the need to control loosens. You are not stuck because you're doing too little. You're stuck because you're holding too tightly. And until that grip softens, the quantum field will keep giving you the same answer. Not to punish you, but to mirror you. The next shift happens when you understand something critical. Control and intention are not the same thing. One constrains reality, the other opens it. That distinction changes everything. Most people believe they're being intentional, when in reality, they're controlling. The difference is subtle on the surface, but radically different at the quantum level. Intention sets direction. Control tries to dictate process. One opens probability, the other compresses it. Intention comes from clarity. It's quiet, stable. It doesn't argue with reality. It doesn't rush timing. It doesn't demand proof. Control, on the other hand, comes from fear disguised as logic. It constantly checks whether things are unfolding correctly. It micromanages decisions. It tries to reduce uncertainty before uncertainty has done its job. From a quantum perspective, intention is a signal without attachment. It informs the field without constraining it. Control attempts to collapse probability prematurely into a specific form. And when you collapse too early, you collapse into what's familiar, not what's expansive. This is why people who are highly disciplined and highly strategic often feel stuck the longest. Their systems are excellent at maintaining stability, but poor at allowing disruption. And quantum jumps require disruption at the level of identity, not action. Neuroscience explains this clearly. Intention activates goal orientation without activating threat. Control activates threat response. When threat is active, your brain narrows focus. Narrow focus reduces perception. Reduced perception limits available choices. Limited choices recreate familiar outcomes. The loop completes itself. Spiritually, intention is alignment with possibility. Control is resistance to mystery. One trusts that reality can organize beyond current understanding. The other insists that safety exists only in predictability, and predictability is the architecture of the old timeline. You can feel the difference inside your body. Intention feels grounded, control feels tense. Intention allows pauses, control fears silence. Intention moves when something feels aligned. Control moves because waiting feels unsafe. If this resonates with you, subscribe to stay connected and hit the bell icon to get notified. Also, join our manifestation club on gogetter.au, where we keep raising the energy together. You're stepping into a space where these kinds of awakenings are our foundation. This isn't just a channel, this is a frequency. If you felt a shift while watching, you're already tuned in. This is why letting go of control feels threatening to the ego. The ego equates control with survival. It believes that if it stops managing, something will go wrong. But that belief was formed in an earlier version of you, one that needed rigidity to stay safe. Timelines don't shift when you control harder. They shift when the identity that needs control is no longer in charge. That identity was designed to survive, not to expand. Expansion requires a different operating system. When intention replaces control, you stop forcing clarity. You allow clarity to emerge. Decisions feel simpler, not easier, but simpler. You don't need to justify every move. You don't need to see 10 steps ahead. You take the next aligned step and allow the field to respond. This is where most people lose patience. They want certainty before movement. But certainty is the reward of the old timeline. The new one responds to trust first, not blind trust, embodied trust. Trust rooted in internal stability rather than external proof. When you release control, you're not becoming passive, you're becoming receptive. Receptive systems adapt faster than rigid ones. They respond to information instead of defending against it. And that adaptability is what allows probability to reorganize. If you've been trying to force your way into a new reality, this is the pivot point. Stop asking how to make it happen. Start noticing where you're trying to manage outcomes instead of stabilizing identity. The moment control softens, the field has room to move. And movement doesn't come as chaos. It comes as a shift in perception first. That's when letting go stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like relief. But relief is uncomfortable for the ego, because relief means the old role is ending. And that's why the next phase always brings resistance. Not from reality, but from identity. That's where the real work begins. Letting go doesn't scare you because it's wrong. It scares you because it threatens an identity that learned to survive through control. The ego was built in environments where certainty meant safety, predictability meant protection, and anything outside that structure felt dangerous. Even if it promised expansion, when you loosen control, the ego interprets it as risk. It doesn't see growth, it sees exposure. That's why, the moment you stop micromanaging outcomes, a subtle anxiety can surface. Thoughts like, what if I mess this up? Or, what if I miss something important? Aren't signs of intuition. They're signs of an identity losing authority. From a psychological standpoint, the ego exists to maintain continuity. Its job is to keep the story of me consistent over time. Control is one of its main tools. If you control outcomes, you preserve the narrative. If you let go, the narrative becomes unstable, and instability feels like danger to a system designed for survival. This is why people often return to control right after moments of surrender. They feel relief, then panic. The relief comes from alignment. The panic comes from identity displacement. The old self senses it's no longer needed and tries to regain relevance. Spiritually, this is the moment of ego death that people romanticize but rarely understand. Ego death is not dramatic. It doesn't feel like transcendence. It feels like uncertainty without immediate answers. It feels like standing without armor. And the ego resists that because armor once kept you alive. Neuroscience supports this reaction. When control drops, your brain temporarily loses predictive dominance. It can't map the future as easily. That gap creates discomfort even if nothing is actually wrong. The system hasn't learned yet that openness can be safe, so it signals caution. This is also why people confuse intuition with fear during this phase. Fear speaks loudly and urgently. Intuition speaks quietly and steadily. Control amplifies fear because it keeps scanning for threats. Letting go reduces noise, but the transition between the two can feel disorienting. The key here is understanding that resistance doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means the ego is being asked to step back. And stepping back feels like disappearing to a part of you that equates existence with control. This is where many timelines fail to shift. Not because the field didn't respond, but because the observer retreated at the threshold. They touched openness, felt the discomfort, and returned to familiar management. The old timeline welcomed them back instantly. In the comments, share one small commitment you're making today to release control. It could be as simple as pause, or allow, or trust. Your word matters. Your commitment matters. Because you matter. But if you can tolerate this phase, not fight it, not analyze it, simply allow it, something important happens. The ego recalibrates. It learns that safety doesn't come from control anymore. It comes from coherence, from presence, from trust in internal stability rather than external certainty. This is not about abandoning responsibility. It's about releasing hyper-responsibility, the belief that everything depends on you managing it perfectly. That belief kept you functional in the past, but it can't take you into a new timeline. If you're feeling resistance right now, it's not a stop sign. It's a threshold. The discomfort is not danger. It's unfamiliar freedom. If this resonates, type in the comments I release control, not as a performance, as a decision to stop holding reality hostage to your fear. Because the moment control loosens enough, something else takes its place. Clarity. And clarity is what actually collapses a new reality. Timelines don't change because you decide they should. They change because the observer stabilizes into a different internal position. Most people think reality shifts when circumstances change first. But in quantum terms, circumstances are the lagging indicator. Identity is the leading one. A timeline is not a place you move to. It's a pattern you repeat. And repetition continues as long as the internal conditions that generate it remain active. When those conditions dissolve, the pattern loses coherence. It can't sustain itself anymore. That's when change becomes inevitable, not forced. From a quantum perspective, a timeline exists as a set of probabilities that are continuously reinforced by observation. Observation isn't just looking. It's interpretation, expectation, emotional response, and identity reference. When all of those remain the same, probability collapses into the same outcome again and again. This is why effort alone never creates a real jump. You can change behavior while keeping identity intact, and the result will still feel familiar. The external details shift slightly, but the structure stays the same. New job, same stress. New relationship, same dynamics. New environment, same inner tension. That's not bad luck. That's coherence doing its job. A real timeline shift happens when the internal reference point changes. When you stop identifying as the version of yourself that needs control, proof, or constant reassurance. When you no longer interpret events through fear or urgency. When your nervous system stops reacting to life as if survival is at stake. Neuroscience describes this as a change in baseline state. The brain no longer predicts threat as default. Emotional responses soften. Attention widens. Decision-making becomes less reactive and more intuitive. That internal shift changes behavior automatically, without discipline. And behavior is how timelines reorganize themselves externally. Spiritually, this is often described as becoming the observer instead of the character. Not dissociating, but loosening identification. You're still engaged in life, but you're no longer trapped inside the same script. You respond instead of react. You choose instead of repeat. This is why real shifts often feel anticlimactic at first. There's no dramatic moment where you feel like you jump timelines. You just notice that certain reactions don't happen anymore. Certain situations don't hook you. Certain choices feel obvious instead of complicated. The new timeline isn't announced, it's inhabited. Another important detail most people miss is that timelines don't change all at once. They phase in internally first, externally second. That's why patience matters here. Not as waiting, but as non-interference. The moment you try to rush the shift, you reintroduce the old observer. Control collapses probability into the known. Presence allows probability to reorganize. When you stop trying to choose the future and instead stabilize in a new internal state, the field does the rest. Not magically, precisely. This is also why people sometimes feel like they're between lives. The old timeline no longer fits, but the new one hasn't fully materialized yet. That gap isn't failure, it's transition. It's the space where identity is updating and reality is catching up. If you're in that space now, nothing is wrong. You're not behind. You're not missing something. You're in the exact phase where timelines loosen their grip, where repetition breaks, where control becomes unnecessary because coherence is taking over. This is the point where the jump becomes unavoidable, not because you forced it, but because the conditions that sustained the old timeline no longer exist. And when that happens, reality doesn't need motivation. It reorganizes. Collapsing a new reality doesn't happen through effort. It happens through permission. Permission to stop managing every outcome. Permission to let identity settle instead of constantly adjusting. Permission to trust that once coherence is present, the field already knows how to organize the details. This is where many people misunderstand what collapse actually means. They imagine a dramatic event, a sudden breakthrough, a visible before and after moment. But real collapse is quieter than that. It's the point where the observer stops interfering, where the internal state becomes stable enough that probability has no reason to remain suspended. The old timeline didn't persist because it was powerful. It persisted because it was reinforced. Every reaction, every attempt to control, every effort to predict kept feeding the same structure. Once that reinforcement ends, the structure dissolves naturally. It doesn't fight to survive. It simply loses coherence. This is why the most profound shifts don't feel like victories. They feel like relief, like stepping out of a role you didn't realize you were exhausted from playing. The pressure lifts, the urgency fades, and in that absence of tension, something new has space to form. From a neurological perspective, this is your nervous system settling into a new baseline. Threat responses quiet down, decision-making becomes simpler, attention stabilizes. When the body feels safe, without needing control, perception changes, and perception is what determines which version of reality you experience. Spiritually, this is embodiment, not chasing a higher state, not trying to become someone else, but allowing the version of you that already exists beneath control to take the lead. That version doesn't need to force outcomes because it's aligned with them. This is where many people accidentally sabotage the process by going back to old habits of overthinking and monitoring. They check results. They look for confirmation. They ask whether the shift is really happening. But asking that question reactivates the old observer, the one who needed proof before trust. Staying in a new timeline requires consistency, not effort. It requires remaining familiar with the internal state that allowed the shift to begin: calm, presence, sufficiency. The sense that nothing is missing and nothing needs to be rushed. That's why grounding matters at this stage. Not grounding to manifest more, but grounding to avoid slipping back, to stabilize identity while the external world finishes reorganizing itself. This is where structure can help, not as control, but as support. That's the role of quantum rebirth. It exists for this phase, the moment after control loosens. When identity is shifting and timelines are recalibrating, it helps you recognize what's happening internally, so you don't mistake relief for stagnation or silence for loss. Alongside it, the Quantum Grimoire offers a way to anchor coherence through reflection and intentional focus, not to tell the universe what to do, but to keep your internal signal clean while reality responds. You'll find both in the pinned comment whenever you feel ready to deepen and stabilize the shift that's already underway. Nothing here requires force. Nothing needs to be chased. The moment control ends, collapse begins. And once collapse begins, reality doesn't ask for permission. It reorganizes. If this video resonated, it's because you're not waiting for a new timeline. You've already stopped feeding the old one. And that's how the shift actually happens. Make sure you share this video with your loved ones. You might just be the blessing in disguise they need today. Remember, you're not just sharing. You're spreading freedom and clarity. And that energy will dissolve resistance from everything you're calling in.